A silence hangs over the plains, a stillness so heavy it can shatter the spirit. The moment Kito drew his first rattling breath in the sprawling dust-red settlement of Ing'atatek in Kenya, his life was sealed behind walls. Unlike the other sons of the mighty Maasai, who trained with spears and learned to read the vast, shifting movements of the Serengeti, Kito's world was a solitary, high-walled boma. His existence was contained within a dim, smoky hut where the small, protective windows were always sealed against the relentless East African sun, and the heavy leather flap of the door was secured from the outside. The people of Ing'atatek whispered about the hidden child, though none had ever seen his face. They spoke in hushed, fearful tones during the cattle drives, at the communal well, or while stirring the morning porridge. They were curious, but the fear of the unknown kept their questions muted. Was he possessed by a wicked spirit? Did the ancestors reject him? The women would murmur, their bracelets clanking nervously as they drew water. The men, less prone to open gossip but equally mystified, simply exchanged knowing, worried glances whenever the matter of the merchant's son arose. Kito's father, Lika, was a respected cattle merchant who carried the burden of his secret like a heavy shield. He moved through the village with a grim focus, keeping his silence and the company of his herd, as if constantly trying to outrun a coming storm. His mother, Sankey, was the visible face of their grief. She went to the trading posts weekly, but the worry etched itself deeper into the lines around her eyes with every setting sun. If pressed, she always offered the same, rehearsed denial. He has the wasting sickness. It is for his own safety. But the reality was far more terrifying than a mere illness. Kito was fundamentally different. His skin was not the deep, rich copper of his people. It was an unnatural, almost luminescent white, like bone exposed to moonlight. And his eyes were an unsettling shade of violet, a color so strange it seemed to hold the cold, sterile light of the stars. His parents had raised him in the perpetual shade, terrified of the catastrophe that would surely erupt if he ever stepped into the unfiltered world. As he moved toward manhood, Kito's confinement became an agonizing test. At 18, he was physically a man, yet emotionally trapped. He spent his days devouring the few tattered books and maps his parents could smuggle in. He read of the winding Owasongyiro River, of the forests filled with leopard shadows and the sky that stretched on forever above the Great Rift Valley. Yet, these places were just ghosts on paper. He had never felt the cool dust beneath his feet or the weight of the sun on his shoulders. His only link to the thriving world outside was Naiyo, the son of the village's powerful spiritual elder. Naiyo had been Kito's secret companion since childhood, a bond of secrecy and shared shadows. Naiyo, with his dark, curious eyes and the freedom to roam the plains, lived the life Kito could only dream of. Naiyo brought the taste of life to Kito, stories of the cattle raids, the joyous wedding dances, and the thrill of tracking a lion. But Kito wanted more than just echo tales. One scorching afternoon, when the dry season heat made the air shimmer, Naiyo arrived, his usual confident grin replaced by a look of thrilling conspiracy. He dropped onto the dirt floor of Kito's dim hut, his face flushed with the kind of reckless excitement that Kito knew meant only trouble. "Kito," Naiyo whispered, leaning in as if sharing a prophecy, "there is something I have to show you." Kito, who had been lost in a book about the migratory patterns of birds, looked up, his strange eyes intense. "What is it?" he asked, knowing the forbidden nature of the request. Naiyo's eyes danced with fire. "I found something near the Valley of Whispering Stones, a secret place. You would be mesmerized." The Valley of Whispering Stones. It was a place of myth and warning, the location of Naiyo's most forbidden stories. Kito's parents had guarded him strictly, but the desperate hunger for reality overwhelmed his ingrained fear. The valley represented life, mystery, and everything that lay beyond his stifling walls. "What is it you found?" Kito asked, forcing his voice to remain steady as the anticipation pulsed through him. Naiyo grinned, his teeth flashing. "Cubs. Lion cubs. I found them 3 days ago, hidden in a cleft of rock. They are shy, but their mother is gone. You could pet them." Kito's breath hitched. Lion cubs. He had seen their powerful images in illustrations, but a real, living, wild creature was beyond imagining. His parents had forbidden all pets, claiming they were too risky. The temptation was now an unbearable weight. I cannot, Naiyo. Kito hesitated, his gaze drifting to the locked door. You know my father. Your father is tracking the herd far south, Naiyo interrupted, his tone sharp with persuasion. We will be quick. We go now, and you will be back before the shadows lengthen. Kito swallowed, his mind racing with the immense possibility. To see the outside world, even for a few heart-stopping moments. He looked at the small, cloth-covered opening where only a faint, angry sliver of light penetrated. It was a prison. The wild, mysterious valley was freedom itself. I agree, Kito whispered, the rush of forbidden action electrifying him. Let us go. With slow, careful movements, Naiyo took a small, tarnished key from his garment and turned the lock Kito didn't know he possessed. As the leather door creaked inward, Kito felt a paralyzing blend of terror and elation. He had never felt the breeze, never known the full heat of the sun on his skin. The unfiltered light struck Kito's face like a physical blow. It was not the soft, muted glow of his compound. It was a blinding, oppressive glare. He instinctively shielded his eyes, feeling the unfamiliar, stinging warmth of the sun on his skin, a hostile, alien sensation. Naiyo watched his friend's discomfort. Are you well? He asked, his voice low with excitement. Kito nodded, though his eyes struggled to adjust. I will be fine, he mumbled, his voice strained. His feet moved cautiously, treading the warm, uneven earth as if it might dissolve beneath him. The sounds of Ingatatek overwhelmed him. The distant lowing of cattle, the sharp calls of the herders, the high-pitched singing of the women. It was a chaotic, dizzying wave of life. As they walked swiftly toward the edge of the settlement, Kito felt the piercing scrutiny of the villagers. He tried not to look, but he felt their shock, their suspicion, and their profound fear. He was an anomaly, a ghostly figure that did not belong to the rich color of the plains. That is Lika's son, one elder whispered, loud enough to cut the air. I thought he was dying. Look at his skin. Another voice murmured, terrified. It is death white. Kito's heart raced. He felt like an outcast, a creature rejected by the sun. But Naiyo, focused on the mission, strode onward, leading Kito toward the great thicket of acacias, the border to the legendary valley. The thicket loomed tall and dark, the shadows stretching long and heavy over the ground. Kito's chest tightened, the fear of the wild mingling with the excitement. He had only heard tales of the valley, a land of powerful spirits and forbidden rituals. Now, he was standing on the precipice of that terrifying reality. Come, Naiyo urged, his voice ringing with impatience. We are so close. As they entered the canopy, the air grew instantly cooler, and Kito felt a strange, surprising calm descend over him. The dense shadows, the way the light dappled and fell, it felt strangely comforting, a welcome that the harsh outside world had denied. It was as if the darkness itself embraced him. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached the den Naiyo had described, a small, dry depression beneath a tangle of exposed roots. Inside, the cubs were there, just as promised. They were small, scruffy things, their coats dusty and their eyes still milky blue. They twitched and whined softly as Naiyo knelt to soothe them. Kito watched in mute awe, his heart swelling with a mixture of profound wonder and tenderness. Slowly, carefully, he reached out to touch the closest cub. Its fur was soft and warm beneath his fingers, and for the first time in his life, Kito felt a powerful, undeniable connection to a living thing. But the moment he touched it, the wonder ended. The cub's gentle breathing stuttered. Its small body convulsed once and then went terrifyingly still. Kito's faint smile vanished, his hand trembling as the cub went utterly limp in his grasp. Naiyo, what is happening? Kito whispered, a wave of cold panic washing over him. Naiyo looked up, his face draining of all color as he stared at the lifeless cub in Kito's hand. I don't know, he stammered, scrambling backward. Kito's racing heart slammed against his ribs as he looked at the other two cubs. To his horror, they too began to collapse, one by one, their small bodies slumping into the earth as if their life force had been violently withdrawn. The valley fell into a terrible, absolute silence. Kito stumbled back, his breath coming in short, choked gasps. He looked down at his own hands, his pale, almost ghostly hands that now seemed to pulse faintly in the gloom. "What have I done?" Kito whispered, his voice trembling with a realization worse than any sickness. Naiyo stood frozen, his eyes wide with a deep, personal terror. "We have to leave now," he hissed, fear overriding all other emotion. As they fled the scene, the overwhelming weight of something darker, something vast and terrifying, settled upon Kito. The world he had longed for was a place of horror, and for the first time, Kito knew exactly why he had been imprisoned. He was not merely sheltered, he was an instrument of death. He was the cursed. The desperate dash back through the thicket was a blur of scratching thorns and labored breathing. Every natural sound, the crackle of dry leaves, the distant cry of a raptor, seemed monstrously loud. But Kito's mind was fixated only on the cold, slack bodies of the cubs. His hands, which he had once seen as tools of discovery, now felt like weapons of mass destruction. "What am I?" They burst out onto the open plain, and the familiar heat of the village felt sickeningly suffocating. Kito barely noticed the staring villagers this time. The murmurs of fear and curiosity were drowned out by the internal screaming in his mind. Naiyo, the confident boy of the plains, was unnaturally quiet, his face etched with unease. He avoided Kito's gaze. There was nothing left to be said. Kito threw open the door of the hut, and the two boys slipped inside, slamming the world shut behind them. For a long, awful moment, they stood in the smoky darkness, the silence pressing down on them. Kito's mind cycled through impossible questions. What was that power? Why did life recoil from him? Finally, Naiyo broke the tense silence, his voice hollow. "We must tell your parents."
Kito resoilet.
The thought of confronting his father, Lika, a man steeped in fierce spiritual beliefs, was paralyzing. Kito feared his judgment, his condemnation. "No," Kito muttered, shaking his head. "We cannot tell Papa." "But Kito," Naiyo insisted, his voice hushed, "this is beyond the natural world. They are the only ones who know the old ways." Kito swallowed hard, the fear catching in his throat. He had lived in the shadows for so long, protected from a world he had yearned for. Now, he felt uncertain of everything, especially his own existence. "Very well," Kito whispered, his voice barely audible. "I will go to Mama Sankey first. Perhaps she will forgive me." The compound was heavy with a dreadful stillness. Kito's parents had returned quietly, earlier than expected. Kito found Sankey sitting by the fire, preparing a thick sorghum stew. Her face was clouded with a deep, enduring exhaustion. Kito stood in the doorway, watching her for a long moment. She looked fragile today, her brow furrowed, her eyes distant, as if the immense secret she guarded was finally beginning to consume her. "Mama," Kito said quietly, stepping into the light. Sankey looked up, startled.
Kito.
"What is it? Your face is pale. Have you been outside?" Her voice held a clear note of terror. Kito nodded, the confession of physical pain. "I went with Naiyo. We went toward the valley." He continued, his voice barely a whisper. "We found lion cubs. I touched one, and it instantly died, Mama. Then all the others did too." His voice caught in a sharp sob. "And I touched a herdsman on the way back. He fell instantly." Sankey said nothing for a long time. She simply stared at her son, her face entirely drained of color, her eyes wide with not just shock, but something darker, a profound raw terror. "Kito," she whispered, her voice a dry gasp. "You should never have gone out. You were not prepared." "Prepared for what?" Kito demanded, his voice rising in anguish. "What evil is inside me, Mama? Why does my touch destroy life?" Sankey's hands trembled violently, and for the first time in Kito's memory, her composure failed. Her usually strong, dignified demeanor crumbled, and tears spilled down her face. I did not want you to know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never wanted you to suffer this way, the pain your father and I have carried.
No.
Tell me, Kito pressed, desperation tightening his voice. Sankey took a ragged, shuddering breath and looked up, her eyes filled with guilt and bottomless sadness. Before you came to us, she began slowly, your father and I were barren. We sought children for many seasons, but the womb remained empty. We were desperate, so we went to the most sacred Lembas, the sky gods. We prayed and offered all we had. And finally, they answered. But they warned us there would be an unbearable price. Kito's blood turned to ice. A price, he repeated. Sankey nodded, the tears falling freely. They told us your life would be a gift, yes, but bound by a terrible curse. You carry the power of life and death, Kito. It is why we sealed you away. We tried to protect you from the world, and the world from you. Kito staggered backward, his mother's revelation striking him like a warrior's spear. Cursed. The truth he had yearned for was this monstrous revelation, locked away just like him. But why? Kito yelled, his voice shaking with betrayed anger. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep me a prisoner, a secret? Sankey's sobs grew louder, and she covered her face with her hands. Because we were afraid. Afraid of what you would become. We thought if we kept you in the dark, the curse would stay asleep. A surge of blazing fury and injustice coursed through Kito. His entire existence was a carefully constructed lie. I was owed the truth. Kito shouted, his fists shaking at his sides. I deserved to know what awful thing I am. Sankey looked up, her expression pure agony. We were only trying to be parents, Kito. We thought it was the only way to save you. Kito turned away, his chest heaving with a suffocating blend of rage and despair. I don't want protection, he muttered, his voice cold. I want answers. Before Sankey could speak again, the door flap was thrown back, and Lika stepped into the room. His expression was granite hard, his jaw tight as he looked between his distraught wife and his furious son. What is the meaning of this shouting? Lika demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Kito stood his ground, his gaze meeting his father's. I want the truth, Papa, he said, his voice steady but filled with accusation. No more lies. Why am I kept locked here? What is this curse? Lika's face tightened. He looked briefly at Sankey, who was still weeping. The silence in the room was a crushing weight, thick with untold secrets. Finally, after an agonizing silence, Lika spoke. You already know the truth, Kito, he said slowly, his voice grave. The gods blessed you with a body, but they cursed your hands. Your touch is fatal. We hid you to protect you, and to protect our community. Kito's hands shook uncontrollably. But why me? He demanded. Why was I chosen for this debt? What did I do to deserve it? Lika's jaw clenched, and he looked away, his face clouded by deep-seated guilt. It is not what you did, son, he muttered. It is what we did. Kito's heart pounded. What do you mean? Lika took a deep, agonizing breath, his eyes dark with a terrible remorse. Before you were born, your mother and I defied the laws of the ancestors. We broke an oath to the earth spirits out of our own desperation for a child. We knew there would be consequences, but we blinded ourselves to the severity. His voice cracked, and he fell silent. So it is true, Kito whispered, his voice weak. I am the payment for your sin. Lika nodded slowly, his expression one of enduring pain. Yes, Kito. You carry the curse of life and death in your hands. It is a power that is now yours alone. Kito turned away, his mind spinning, consumed by the terrible knowledge. The truth was too monumental, too devastating. I cannot stay here, Kito muttered, the words a decision. Kito, wait. Sankey cried, fear renewed in her voice. Where will you go? Kito didn't answer. He walked out the door, his purpose clear. He needed the full, unvarnished truth. Naiyo, who had been waiting in the shadows, rushed forward.
Kito.
Where are you going now? I need answers, Kito replied, his voice cold and resolute. Real answers. And they will not come from this hut of lies. Naiyo frowned, concern mixing with a sense of dread. What does that mean? What happened? Kito stopped and fixed his friend with a determined gaze. The Oloiboni, spiritual elder. He knows the ancient history. I am going to him. Naiyo hesitated. The Oloiboni Pai was a repository of secret knowledge and dangerous rites. I will come with you, Naiyo said, his loyalty stronger than his fear. Kito nodded, grateful for the one loyal soul, and together, they set off toward the elder's remote compound. The moon was rising, casting long, sharp shadows over the plain. Kito's heart hammered as they approached the compound of Oloiboni Pai, an elderly man with a face like sun-dried rock and eyes that seemed to see into the distant past. He was seated by a small, crackling fire, studying a collection of carved divination bones. He looked up as Kito and Naiyo arrived, his expression perfectly still. Kito, the Oloiboni said slowly, his voice calm, yet resonating with authority. The one who should never leave the shadow. Why are you here? I demand answers, Kito replied, his voice firm and strained. About the curse. About why my life has been spent hidden away. The Oloiboni studied him for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. You have spoken to your parents, I see.
Kito nodded.
They spoke of a pact. A curse. But they did not tell me the full payment. The Oloiboni sighed, his gaze momentarily softening. Some secrets are like heavy poisons, Kito. They are better left buried. The truth you seek is a dangerous burden. I do not care. Kito insisted, his fury returning. I must know. The Oloiboni's eyes flickered with a deep, weary pity. Very well, he said quietly. But heed this warning, boy. The full truth will shatter your peace. Kito stood his ground, his hands trembling but his stance resolute. I am ready to be shattered. The Oloiboni stood, motioning for them to enter his small, ancient hut. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the firelight that cast dancing shadows. Shelves lined the walls, crowded with sacred gourds, dried skins, and scrolls tied with leather cord. The air was thick with the scent of powerful, protective herbs and a profound sense of antiquity. The Oloiboni sat down on a hide rug, gesturing for Kito and Naiyo to sit opposite him. For a long moment, he gazed into the flames, seeking the right incantation. Finally, he spoke. Your parents told you the gods cursed you for their desperation. That much is a half-truth. But the root of the power lies deeper. It is not just payment for a recent mistake, it is the culmination of a vast betrayal that happened generations ago. Kito frowned, the revelation sending a chill through him. A betrayal? The Oloiboni nodded. Your bloodline carries a deep, primal spiritual debt, Kito. Long ago, before your great-grandfathers were even born, your family, the lineage of the great chief Ol-Katand, made a binding agreement with the most powerful earth spirits for absolute dominance over the plains. He was promised power, wealth, and victory. But when the time came to honor the final, terrible pact, he renounced the spirits. He betrayed the sacred agreement. And in their terrible wrath, they cursed his entire line. Every single child born of his blood, male and female, would carry the dual power of creation and destruction in their hands. Kito felt his heart turn to stone. His curse was not a recent accident, it was an ancestral debt, woven into the fabric of his very soul. Is there a way to sever it? Kito asked, his voice shaking with the last of his hope. The Oloiboni slowly shook his head. The curse is ancient, Kito. It cannot be undone. But you can learn to discipline it. That is your only path forward. Kito clenched his fists. Control. How could he possibly control a force that had already taken innocent lives? There is one place where the necessary knowledge survives, the Oloiboni continued, his voice heavy with solemnity. High in the forgotten Loita Hills, The spiritual sect known as the Zidzos, the steadfast ones, hold the deepest secrets of this old power. They may be able to teach you how to master the gift and the curse. Kito looked up, his violet eyes burning with a fierce, new resolve. Then I will go to the Loita Hills. Naiyo flinched with alarm. The Loita Hills? Kito, the people there are fiercely isolationist. They view all outsiders as a threat. The Oloiboni nodded gravely. It is true. They live a secluded life, wary of all who trespass. But if you wish to learn the limits of your power, it is the only place left on the plains. Kito's choice was final. He could not live in ignorance and fear, a constant danger to everyone he cared for. He had to understand and master the force within him. If it meant facing the isolated ones in the Loita Hills, then so be it. I will go, Kito stated firmly, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and absolute, focused will. Naiyo looked at his friend, his face pale, but his voice steady. I will travel with you. The Oloiboni's gaze sharpened. The journey will be perilous. You must be prepared for the price of their welcome. Kito nodded, his hands now miraculously steady. I am prepared. The first light of dawn struggled to pierce the dense, smoky air of the plains as Kito and Naiyo began their long journey toward the Loita Hills. The narrow path wound through fields of tall, dry grass that whispered secrets as they passed. Kito's mind was a whirlwind of agonizing questions. What if the Zidzos could not help? What if this curse was truly irreversible? He glanced at Naiyo, whose usual easy spirit was replaced by a grim determination. We are close, Naiyo muttered, breaking the tense, rhythmic silence. The hills should appear just beyond the next thicket. Kito nodded, his stomach twisting into a hard knot as the weight of the journey settled upon him. He had heard of the Zidzos, a people shrouded in mystery, known for their harsh isolation and powerful spiritual defenses. The idea of walking into their hidden world filled Kito with paralyzing dread. But the truth was his final destination, and the Loita Hills held the map. As they cleared the thicket, the land opened up to reveal a small, camouflaged village nestled deep in a secluded, rocky valley. Ava time was silent. Too silent. There were no children playing, no women grinding grain. The small, squat huts were arranged haphazardly, and the smoke that rose from the hearths smelled strange, sharp, and metallic. Naiyo hesitated at the peak of the ridge, glancing at Kito. Are you certain we should continue? Kito took a deep, steadying breath. I have no other choice. Together, they descended into the valley, their steps slow and deliberate. As they drew closer, the villagers began to emerge from their huts, their faces lean and suspicious. Kito felt their eyes on him, sharp, hostile, and accusatory. A group of stern-faced men, dressed in simple, rough-woven robes, stepped forward to block their path. The leader, a tall man with an unforgiving scar across his forehead, narrowed his eyes. You do not belong here, he said, his voice low and threatening. State your purpose for entering the Loita Hills. Kito swallowed hard, maintaining his gaze. We have come to seek the Zidzos. We need their ancient guidance. At the mention of the sacred name, the men exchanged quick, dark glances. The leader took a step closer, his eyes raking over Kito. No one comes here for guidance, he spat. Especially not one from the polluted lands. His gaze lingered pointedly on Kito's unnatural pale skin and violet eyes. Kito's heart pounded. He felt the full force of the villagers' deep-seated suspicion. He had to act fast. I was born with a curse, Kito declared, his voice firm and clear. A terrifying power that has followed my lineage for centuries. The Zidzos are the only ones who can help me understand it. The tall man stared at him for a long moment, his jaw tight. The villagers behind him whispered amongst themselves, their eyes fixed on Kito with a mixture of profound awe and primal terror. Finally, the leader gave a slow, reluctant nod, though his expression remained hard and suspicious. Follow me. They were led through the silent village, past the watchful, hostile eyes of the community. The path wound deep into the rocky valley, leading them eventually to a small, hidden shrine constructed of black basalt. Standing at its entrance were two elderly women, their faces weathered and wise, their eyes holding an unsettling, ancient light as they looked at Kito. The Zidzos. Without a word, the two women motioned for Kito to step forward. He felt a strange, magnetic pull, as if something deep within his core was being drawn out by their presence. Naiyo offered a quiet, encouraging nod, but Kito's legs trembled as he approached the elders. The air around the shrine pulsed with a powerful, concentrated energy. One of the women, her voice soft but absolute, spoke. "You have traveled far to learn the truth of your affliction, Kito." Kito nodded, his throat suddenly tight. "Yes. My parents spoke of a pact before I was born. But they hid the full story. I need to know what I am. Why this curse?" The second woman's eyes held a deep sorrow. "It is not just the curse of your parents' mistake, child. It is the curse of the ancient blood. A power born of broken promises and spilled blood." Kito felt his stomach clench. Betrayal. The first woman locked her gaze onto his. "Your ancestor, the great chief Ol-Katand, made an unforgivable covenant with the spirits for earthly power. He was promised everything in exchange for the ultimate devotion. When he failed to honor the final promise, he turned his back on the sacred pact. In their eternal rage, the spirits cursed his descendants. Every child born of his line would forever carry the awful, dual power of life and instantaneous death in their hands." Kito felt his mind reeling. The chief priest had only hinted at this, but hearing it spoken aloud, laid bare, was crushing. "Is there a way to revoke it?" Kito asked, his voice barely a breath. The second woman slowly shook her head. "The curse is ancient, powerful, and cannot be undone. But you can learn to command it. That is the only path left to you." Kito's hands clenched into fists of despair. How could he master a force that had already brought such destruction? The first woman's gaze softened slightly. "You must seek to understand the fire within you. It is not only a curse, it is a terrible gift, a power that must be controlled and wielded with immense responsibility. You have the choice to determine its purpose." Kito shook his head, disbelief flooding him. "I reject this power. I never wanted it." The second woman stepped forward, laying a hand gently on his shoulder. Her touch sent a powerful cleansing warmth through Kito's body, yet did him no harm. "You did not choose it, child, but it is yours now. You must choose how to live with it, or be consumed by it." Kito's mind raced. The agony of the curse, the deaths he had caused, it was all too much. But deep down, he knew that Zidzos were right. He could not run any longer. He had to face his awful destiny. "What must I do?" Kito asked, his voice steady now, filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The Zidzos exchanged a knowing glance, then nodded. "You must return to the plains. Leave this valley, and learn to live alongside the power you contain. It will be the most difficult path you have ever walked, but it is the only way to redemption." Kito felt a profound wave of clarity wash over him. The journey ahead was long, fraught with danger, but for the first time, he knew exactly what he had to do. As Kito and Naiyo made their way back through the remote village, the silent, wary villagers watched them in hushed reverence. The hostility had not vanished, but something fundamental had changed. Kito no longer felt like a victim. He was ready to face his power. As they climbed the ridge and the hidden valley disappeared behind them, Naiyo spoke, breaking the silence. "So, Kito, what is the plan now?" Kito took a deep breath, feeling the full, monumental weight of his destiny settle upon his shoulders. "Now, we go home. I have an enormous debt to learn." Naiyo nodded, his familiar, mischievous grin finally returning to his face. "I will be with you, every single step of this long walk." Kito smiled faintly, deeply grateful for his friend's unbreakable loyalty. He knew the road ahead was not for the faint of heart, but for the first time, Kito felt prepared. As they disappeared into the vast, unending landscape, The shadows that had once contained him now felt like a part of his essence. Kito had been born into a legacy of destruction, but now, he would learn to harness it. The curse was his own, and he was ready to carry it with strength. He was ready to command his destiny, and that is where our journey with Kito must pause for now. If this compelling, complex tale of ancient curses and newfound power captivated you, please let us know. Tap that like button to support our storytelling, and make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming mythological deep dives. Click right here to watch another incredible story about the fate of a cursed king.